So what's going on with deadly weapons named after fruit? Hi, it's Todd from Todd's Workshop and Todd Cutler here, and I bought this 1200-year-old Greek fire grenade, and it got me thinking. A few weeks ago, Matt Easton and myself went into the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, fantastic place, visit it, and we had a look at this grenade launcher here. If I remember correctly, both Matt and myself thought that the name grenade was about Granada in Spain, but in fact it's not that. It is grenade, as in small bomb that you throw around, but in fact it's French for pomegranate. So what's going on with deadly weapons named after fruit? Fire weapons go back at least as far as the ancient Greeks, and they, in the 5th century, even had a sort of pseudo flamethrower that they used for burning down wooden fortifications and for cracking stone walls. So this book here is from the Museum of Ancient Greek Technology in Athens. Fantastic museum, fantastic book. Check out this picture here. And it's of a Boeotian flamethrower. Now it's not a flamethrower quite as we would know it, but what it's got is a set of bellows with a big pot of burning sulphur and pitch and stuff at the end, so it can do a really concentrated heat burn on the end of a crane arm at some walls. Fantastic. But the technology developed from there. The ancient Greeks had fire arrows, and so did the Romans, but they were of quite an unsophisticated type, really. But by the 6th, 7th century AD, around Byzantium, they invented Greek fire, and that was something else completely. Now, we do know that Greek fire was incredibly sophisticated. It was quite a formulation, and we have little hints about what it did, but unfortunately, we just don't know exactly what it was. But we do know that they had ship-mounted flamethrowers. And that is just amazing. Can you imagine watching some Hollywood film and they wheel out the ship-mounted flamethrowers and they take out the other enemy fleet? Nobody would believe a word of it. But they were not fantasy. They existed. We just don't exactly know how they were used, how the concoction was dispensed. I mean, just check out these pictures, and there's lots of them that show it. But the thing is, we just have massive gaps in the knowledge. Like I said, we don't know what it was, and we don't know the machinery, the mechanism with which they dispensed it. We know Greek fire existed, but we don't really know how it was used. There's just not the evidence. But some accounts say that it was ignited from the nozzle itself, so basically like a modern flamethrower. Some, really intriguingly, say that when it landed on water, it would auto-ignite, so there was no ignition source when you jetted it out in the first place. It just did it itself. But what we do know is around about the same time, they started to put it into what we would call hand grenades, incendiary hand grenades. We know a little bit more about what they put in the actual grenades than we do the liquid fire that they shot from ships. So we have some recipes, and although they're a little hard to interpret, we know a lot of the ingredients that went in. So pitch, pine pitch, turpentine, light crude, good supplies of that in the Middle East, sulphur, and if you're making a stink pot version, it creates loads of choking smoke and fumes, then camphor would be a good candidate for that, and they may or may not have included oxidizers as well. Really sophisticated stuff a long time back. That mix of ingredients is not going to make this explode like we would think of a grenade exploding in the modern day and age. But they were incendiary weapons, and they were fearsome enough that they were used all over the Byzantine Empire and the Middle East. They were in massive quantity. But of course, when gunpowder arrived in the 13th century, everything changed again. And they used it for guns, but of course it didn't take long before they started using it for bombs. And then sooner or later, the hand grenade with an explosive force arrived. So when hand grenades were first invented, they weren't the metal casing that you might expect. They were actually ceramic or glass, following on, I suppose, from the incendiary grenades. But they have a little filling spout at the top, and they looked much like a pomegranate. And in fact, grenade is the French word for pomegranate, and that is where it comes from. But when Matt and I mentioned grenades, we were corrected on the origin of the word. But also people said, well, they're full of small seeds inside. And that's part of what people were thinking about with hand grenades, because of course hand grenades are full of those sort of shrapnel things as well. I am fully on board with the idea that hand grenades were named after a pomegranate. But I am not at all convinced by the argument that because they have seeds inside, that was also part of the story. Let me explain. Hi, I've interrupted this film for another Todd Cutler related interesting fact. And it's simple. Medieval people had fun. Because check this out. It had to have been made as a joke. And it's a copy of one in Bergen Museum dated about 1300. Anyway, you'll find this and loads of other pieces at toddcutler.com. Back to the film. There are two kinds of explosive, high explosive and low explosive. Now, until recent times, it was all low explosive. It's gunpowder. Now we use high explosives, and they work in a really different way. And that's what we use in modern grenades. Low explosive was what they used then. The explosion that is caused by gunpowder is actually the gunpowder itself burning very rapidly. And when it burns rapidly, it creates gas in a sealed container that creates pressure. And it's that bursting pressure of the gas which drives the outer shell outward, creating the flying fragments, creating the devastation that you want your hand grenade to create. So you have a container with your gunpowder burn going on inside it. That creates pressure. But the higher the pressure, the faster the burn. The faster the burn, the bigger bang you're going to get for the charge within it. So when you're making grenades, it's an absolute imperative to make the casing as strong and heavy as possible. So in that way, what you get is the biggest, fastest explosion you can get, sending your fragments of the casing outwards, but not, in the early days, components that were inside. It was just the powder and the casing. Look at these pictures of medieval hand grenades from Syracuse. Now you can see from the ribbing and the sort of the spiked areas on the outside, they're looking for this case to fragment, but to stay in chunky pieces that are going to do a lot of damage when they go flying out. And this basic principle of hand grenade design didn't really alter pretty much until the Second World War. But that kind of design was simply not possible in the medieval period. It would not have worked effectively with the explosives they had. So when people are talking about the seeds in a pomegranate, I think what they're doing is they're just confusing modern hand grenade technology with what was possible in the medieval period and just trying to make a nice story out of it. Grenade, coming from the French for pomegranate, absolutely. Grenade, because of the seeds within it, I don't think it has a basis. So let's conclude. The French invented these, it seems, in 1536, and they were powder inside with a casing. And it was the powder exploding, sending the casing outwards, that did the damage. They weren't loaded up with seeds inside or anything else, and no kind of shrapnel type thing. And there we are. So, all started from my lovely Byzantine fire grenade. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you did, subscribe to the channel and go and check out our websites, because if you like this kind of content, you will love what we sell. Loads of medieval weapons. And the last thing I'd say is that we have started a second YouTube channel now, all history stuff, but things that don't really fit on this main channel here. So go and check that out too. See you again. Bye.